Hey, what's up guys? It's Kyle and welcome back to another Tools Day. Today I want to talk about a tool that I had actually never heard about until just recently, so let's get into it. All right, so today we are going to talk about a Festool tool. So already I know a lot of you are like, oh my God, overpriced tools. And honestly, I would agree that is why I typically never even entertained the idea. The first time I saw a Festool was on this old house when I was growing up. And I remember Tommy Silva using them and thinking, what the heck is this ugly looking tool? Because honestly, it just looked so out of place from anything I'd ever seen. Because, you know, in the Midwest, it's like DeWalt, Milwaukee, maybe some Bosch, and like that was it. So I never even entertained the idea of a Festool, especially being a carpenter out on a rough framing construction site like I am now. But thanks to social media, I was introduced to Festool again, and more importantly, the tool we're gonna talk about today. So this is the HKC 55, and this is a cordless circular saw, as you can see. Now, typically, I'm not a fan of a blade right, but it seems like most track saws are going to have that blade right sidewinder style that a lot of people, you know, are used to seeing anyway. But why am I talking about the HKC 55? Well, you guys have seen the video on the cut hub. I am on the pursuit of finding basically the perfect solution to make repetitive quality cuts on the job site time after time after time. And so that's why the HKC 55 came into play out on my job site. First, we'll talk a little bit about the tool. This tool is an 18-volt tool. So Festool has their own proprietary 18-volt batteries. It's going to use one of them, so it's only 18 volt. It's got a 0 to 50 degree bevel. It's got adjustable depth up to just about 2 inches when it's on the track. And, you know, it weighs, I don't know, I think it's about 7 pounds. And another major thing about this tool is it has really good dust collection, which maybe not as big of a deal out on a job site, but Festool is typically known to be a shop tool, cabinet maker tool, so dust collection becomes a big issue. Now, if anybody knows Festool, you know they do not come cheap. This is a German engineered product, definitely known for quality. This bare tool, so if you buy the tool, the sustainer, which, you know, sustainer's got its own fame because it's a great organization system. You're gonna get the sustainer and the saw for just under $400. If you wanna go ahead and get the kit with the battery, the charger, and I do believe it's the 400 track, but don't quote me on that, I'll have to double check. It's about $700. So right away, yeah, that's expensive. And I'll definitely put some links down below to the Amazon because that's always the easiest thing. And I've got some affiliate links. So if you want to support me and use my links, I do get a kickback. So just being honest with you. But the thing to remember is that this saw doesn't have to be just a track saw. Like most track saws, you can use it to just cut down regular dimensional lumber or sheet goods without a track. I did not buy this saw. They sent me the bare tool kit to try. I went ahead and I bought the batteries, the chargers, I bought a track. So I do have probably close to $500 invested in this system. So about $1,000 in total between tracks, batteries, and the saw. So just want to be honest with you guys. That being said, I wanted to talk about why I like the tool, but more importantly, what Festool could do to, like, I think, sell even more to carpenters and make this tool a little bit more mainstream. So what makes the HKC 55 a viable option on a framing site in the first place? A lot of people told me, do not use a Festool on the job site. It's never going to last. Well, I have had this since early summer now, and that is over 6 months ago, and we've been using it a lot. It has become a very important tool during the framing stage. And this is mainly why. So this is the FSK 250 track. If you're just gonna cut up to like 2x12 material, this is what you want. So this is what I typically use. It's small. It's not this monster long track that I gotta keep track of. And the best part about this saw and this track is that you slide it in and it locks in. So now I've got a portable miter saw, a track saw that never comes disconnected from its track. It's just always here. So that's like the first thing that drew me into this setup in particular. Now, if I flip this over, you're gonna see the second thing that I just absolutely love about this setup. These stoppers right here, they allow me to put this into material and it automatically squares up the saw to whatever I'm cutting. So 99% of all my jobs get 90-degree cuts on almost all the framing, and we do a ton of it. Every board has to get cut down. I don't have pre-cut studs. Everything is rough framed, or rough lumber that I have to cut down to a specific dimension. One thing that I wanted to show was you do have this dust collection bag here. It works really well without any vacuum. Sometimes we use it, sometimes we don't. It is a little bit cumbersome, I think, sticking out the back of the saw. And when we're outside framing, it does a good job of just shooting the dust out of the way. So I typically don't use this, but if you're inside, I recommend using this. Enough about this, I'm gonna get this out of my way. So a lot of times on site, if we're not making a 90-degree cut, we're making a 412 because almost everything on our building is either 90 or it's a 412 pitch for the roof system. So at 18.5 degrees, I can take this little knob right here and I can adjust it to wherever I want it to be, lock it in, and now I'm not setting up a repetitive 90-degree cut, but I'm setting up a 18.5 degree 412 cut. So all of my rafters, any framing that is tying into that 412 roof system, I've just done that without ever having to pull out my square to do that. Let's talk about some of the things on this saw that I think are worthy to note before you buy it. You're not going to be able to effectively cut a 45 degree on a piece of 2x lumber. That is like one of the biggest downsides. They've got a 6¼ inch blade that is not a standard blade. So you can't just go buy a 6¼ blade off the shelf. You're gonna have to get a special, probably ordered from maybe a woodworking store if you're local to one, or go online because it's got a different size arbor and you can't fit. Actually, I don't know, maybe you can, I haven't tried, but I don't think you can fit a 6.5 saw blade in here. And because of that, on the track, if you try to go 45, you can't always get through the lumber. So that's a super big downside to this saw. But if you take it off the track, you are able to get that 45-degree cut. So let's go ahead and just kind of run through some of the pros of this saw that I think you should know about, and then we'll talk about some of the cons and the downside to this saw that are definitely something that you need to know before you go out and spend buku bucks on another circular saw. So the biggest thing about this particular setup, just like this, is that I can make repetitive quality, miter saw quality cuts on site without anything but this. And I know I'm gonna get people that say, you can do that with a square and a regular circular saw. Yeah, you can, but you still have to mark the board. You still have to get that thing lined up just perfect and then get that square where everything is gonna line up to make the cut. This, I will show you, does it effortless and perfect every time. Now, a couple other features that I like about this thing is you got this little button right here. See that? That is ingenious. It is super ergonomic. So it just fits right where your hand is gonna be. If you're pushing across material, you can get that saw guard out of your way, which that is an important thing. If you've ever used a circular saw, you know that. That is a good thing. You've got this fast fix right here that I honestly didn't even see for the longest time. And when you open this up, you gain access to your blade changing hex key. But what's cool is when you go to change your blade, like most circular saws, you have to find that button that you have to push in and then rotate the blade around till it locks in so you can actually unscrew it. This does it. You just heard it. It does it automatically when you pull this guy out, and it makes sure that you also can't pull the trigger. So it almost turns it into like a safety mode, all in one fell swoop just by pulling this out. So I think that's a really cool, ingenious design. Good job, Festool. That's one of those things that you pay for that maybe you don't think you need, but it is a really cool feature. Dust collection is by far probably the best on this saw compared to any other saw that I've used without a vacuum. It does a superb job. And like all cordless tools, no cord, that's a huge plus. If you don't have a cordless track saw, you definitely want a cordless track saw. It makes life so much easier when you don't have cords in your way. Also, when we're talking pros, the batteries They're not a pro, I would say, because I think they're they're undervalued for probably where the rest of battery tech is right now, but their charging is super fast. This is the Airstream battery, 18 volt, and when you put it on an Airstream charger, they charge like super fast. It's only a 5.2 amp hour, so it's definitely, I think, behind in the times, and that's where Festool's probably the biggest downfall, in my opinion, and we'll get to that with this saw. Those are basically, I would say, the biggest pluses to this system, and the number one being that you will be able to get repetitive cuts with precision quality like a miter saw without any setup. So on to the cons. Now remember, they sent me this tool, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be dishonest with you guys. It has some major downfalls, and the biggest downfall of them all, anybody that's used this saw probably will say the same thing. It doesn't have the power that it needs to really be 100% out on the job site. You definitely have to baby going into the cuts. You can't just push it. And honestly, if you were to go and use just about any updated circular saw that's cordless on the market today, it's going to have power to basically just push through anything about as fast as you can do that. And so that's where this saw's number one downfall is. Even though that is the case, we still use it on every job when we have to do our framing. Now, another thing that's really annoying about this saw, and maybe it's just me, maybe it's my hands, maybe it's Greg's hands because he is the one that pointed it out first, is when you're coming in to grab the saw, I am constantly hitting this right here with the back of my hand. And yeah, if you're very careful, you can kind of get your hand in here without doing it. But if you want to, when you go to pick up this saw, it's constantly rubbing on the back of my hand. And so I think that's just a design issue. Maybe if this thing was shifted a little bit, maybe it would be perfect. Obviously, Festool having to do a special blade, not being able to just grab a blade off of your inventory or stock with your other framing saws, that's kind of annoying. So you always have to remember probably to have a spare, because when it does hit something or you get a bad tooth or whatever and it stops cutting very well, you're not just gonna be able to throw whatever framing blade you've got in your tool trailer. And other than that, really, I don't have a whole lot of other negatives. I mean, the battery life is not superb. However, it does charge quick enough that if you've got a couple batteries, you're probably gonna be okay out on a framing site. But enough talk. Those are the pros, those are the cons. I think Festool has the ability to make this an even better saw. But let's do a couple cuts. I'll show you some demo and what we talked about, and hopefully that'll, sell you on whether this saw is a good fit for you or not. All right, so this is the biggest, I guess, controversy, because I have shown this on my Instagram and people are like, oh, I can make as good of a cut every time. I'm an experienced carpenter. Listen, I'm experienced too, but that doesn't mean every cut is gonna be perfect. Now, this is how most people are gonna make their cut. They're gonna get their tape measure. You're gonna come to some, random number, whatever you're trying to cut. You're gonna make your mark, okay? You can take your framing square. No, I don't have my Martinez. It's in my tool trailer. Now on a 2x12, which I'm demoing on, you can't just get one, you can't make your mark all the way across. So you got to do it from both sides. Then you're going to line it up and you're going to make your cut. Yeah, pretty easy, pretty nice cut. Now, I want to show you why the FSK track on the HKC saw makes this so much easier. And dust collection. So now that you have the saw on the track with the dust collection, this is how you're going to make your cut. And remember, you've got tons of material. So it's not about how much time you save on one cut, it's how much you save when you're cutting a whole bunk of lumber. You're gonna make your cut, you're gonna make your mark. You don't need that. You're gonna line up your edge on your mark. And now you've got a perfect cut, not having to even think about going straight or perfect or line up your square on the edge of your saw. I don't know about you, but that definitely saved time. And listen, there is definitely an expense to a tool like this. But you have to remember, every time you spend extra time doing extra steps, trying to be extra perfect, that costs you money on the job site. And that's how I evaluate a tool's worth every time. So let's show you another great feature of this saw. We already talked about how it's gonna be amazing to make those repetitive straight cuts. Well, what about when I told you I gotta make a bunch of 412 pitch cuts? No big deal. I just turn the knob, slide this down to 18.5 degrees, tighten it back up. Okay, I didn't get all the way through. And boom, I've got a perfect 412 pitch cut. Once again, it's gonna be miter saw quality cuts every time. You can definitely hear the power of the motor struggle a little bit. Let's make a bevel cut so I can show you that downside. I'm gonna put this back to 0. This is another kind of annoying thing. You don't have really good access to this with the dust collection on. You also got this guy just dangling around down here. I don't really know what you do. Maybe there would be a cool clip or something to set it on, but that is kind of a little bit annoying. All right, I'm gonna set this at 45. And we're back to 0. Let's just make a straight cut on it. See, that's kind of unsafe, it's underpowered, and I didn't even get all the way through. And this board does have a pretty crappy curve on it, so I will give it that it probably would have gotten through most of it, but that's life. That is, things are not always perfect out on the job site. A simple 1/4 inch would make all the difference in the world. All that being said, we cut probably a couple hundred 2x6 foot or 2x6 16 footers down to a perfect 16-foot dimension. And it would make a lot more sense if you were following me over on Instagram as to what we do on a post frame, but we butt joint the ends of our lumber to make all of our wall girts. And if you don't have a consistent square edge butting to each other every cut, then you can gain or lose a dimension when you're trying to measure out an entire wall. That might not make sense to you, so make sure you're following me on Instagram if you're curious. But the consistency and quality of cuts is everything on a job site, not to mention the efficiency side. As soon as we did this, I noticed a huge change on the job site for especially Greg. Greg usually grabs this tool because he has found it to be super easy. He doesn't have to mark with a square on any of the lumber. You make all your marks and boom, you're cutting it. I just want Festool. I'm doing this video more, to be honest, I want Festool to look at this tool and to say, yeah, we were this close to hitting the mark. Festool makes great tools, maybe overpriced in some people's mind, but I would gladly pay $1,000 again for this tool if it comes out with more power, if it comes out with a better cut depth, and it comes out with maybe a little bit better ergonomics right here in the handle. And I think anybody that's a framer should do the same thing. I know I'm gonna get some people that say this is never going to last on a job site, it's too cheap looking of a tool. Guys, I keep my stuff on the job site in a job site trailer. That's where this has been for the last 6 months, and it's held up perfectly fine. So I don't have an issue recommending it for that. And I would love to hear your guys' comments. I know this saw's been out for a while. It's been reviewed a ton of times, but for some reason, I didn't hear about it until just this last year. So I know there's a lot of you out there that have never heard of it as well. And I would love to hear back on whether you think this would be a good idea on your site. The people that have it, what did I miss? What is the other thing that somebody needs to look at? But until next time, I appreciate you guys watching the channel, watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed this Tools Day. We'll see you guys next week. case you were wondering, this is the kind of dust collection. Just from today's demo, this is how well this thing collects dust. That is impressive.